My father had an epiphany at that point. He said, I'm making a lot of money selling hamburgers and French fries, but that guy is making a lot of money collecting my rent. He's sitting on his ass doing it. I want that job. I don't really control my own destiny, and I want to control my own destiny. We sold all the Burger Kings, but we kept the real estate, made them our tenants. Did the same thing with our hotel portfolio. They bought our hotels. I did the development with Chili's, and then I did build-to-suit developments for 2 other restaurant companies. We went from having 450 employees down to 5. Thank you for having me on, Bo. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Why don't you tell everybody who you are, what you do, what you're all about?
Absolutely. So my name is Joe Tagliente, and I am from the greater Boston area. I'm speaking to you today from my home in Gloucester, Massachusetts. The home for the Perfect Storm and Coda, great proud fishing town. So I'm happy to be talking to you from here. And a little bit about myself is that I'm a guy who is I have had some folks tell me I'm a franchising expert. I know things about franchising and investing in real estate, and that's one of my personal passions is to help and advise entrepreneurs who are interested in the space of franchising, investing. They have a desire to own their own business, but don't quite have an idea, and so they say, let me invest in a franchise. So helping those passionate entrepreneurs invest in launch a franchise business and to grow their franchise business is one of the things that I love to do.
What kind of franchise have you been a part of?
So I was a second generation Burger King franchisee. My dad bought his first Burger King in franchise in 1969 in
Wow.
town Somerville, Massachusetts. And he was really early on in the Burger King system. Every time you buy a Burger King franchise, they give you a store number, and then the number is in the sequence of how they're opening them. So his first store was store number 646, 646. And when you take into consideration there's 19,000 plus Burger Kings worldwide now, he was really early on. And so I went to work with him, and he had established our company by building 10 Burger Kings, and I went to work with him, built another 4, and then we got into other types of real estate investment and development. We developed our own brand of hotels that we ran under our own brand name called Tage Inn, which was a derivative of the family name. Instead of Tagliente Hotel, we called it Tage. Got a great deal on the signage because we cut the name in half, and and then we did other investments and developments in full service restaurants and other things like that. And
So does the Burger King franchise model, is it similar to where with McDonald's, where it's McDonald's is kind of like the landlord, right? And then is Burger King the same way?
so the difference with Burger King is that if you choose to be your own landlord, you can be. And so that's one of the things that was great for us, is that we had the opportunity to invest and own our own real estate, and we chose to do that. And when I say we, I mean my father. And I tell the story that my father bought his first Burger King in 1969, and he managed it himself to learn the business from the ground up, and knew it really well. And then he took his time to open up his second location, and because he wanted to make sure, his first Burger King was a home run. He wanted his second one to be a home run, have high sales and great cash flow and so forth. So he took his time. His second Burger King was a storefront in downtown Boston. It was 150 Tremont Street, right across the street from the Boston Common, which is Boston's version of like Central Park. High traffic area, and he opened it in 1973. It was the first Burger King in the system to break $1 million in annual sales.
Wow.
So he did really, really well with it. But the thing is, when he did that, the landlord saw the business he was doing, and he said to my dad, he said, now that I know how much money you're making, the rent is too low, and when I have an opportunity to jack up the rent on you, I'm going to get you. And so my father had an epiphany at that point. He said, I'm making a lot of money selling hamburgers and French fries, but that guy is making a lot of money collecting my rent. He's sitting on his ass doing it. I want that job. And,
Yeah.
and it was that, but it was also, if I'm at the mercy of a predatory landlord, I don't really control my own destiny, and I want to control
Sure.
my own destiny.
Sure.
So that's so from then on out, he said we're gonna always be our own landlords and buy our own real estate. And he even had an opportunity to go back to the landlord of his first Burger King. It was a lease, and say, would you sell me the property? And they agreed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, was your father immigrant, or was he firstborn generation American, or?
So wonderful question, and very proud story about that. So my father was first generation. He was the son of Italian immigrants. He grew up
Mm,
very, very poor in western Massachusetts, in the Berkshires, the Berkshire Mountains, in a town called Pittsfield, Massachusetts. He was an older gentleman, and so he was born in 1923. So when I was born, he was 43 years old, which in 1966, if you're
that's unheard of.
yeah, if you're 43, you're sending kids off to college already.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And so he so he had me, and then my sister and my brother, and he somehow, from that very modest beginnings, he was able to get himself an appointment to the Naval Academy. So,
Mm,
survived the Depression, then, it got him an appointment to the Naval Academy, went to the Naval Academy, played football at the Naval Academy. He played football against 3 Heisman Trophy winners.
wow.
And they're Blanchard and Davis, both from Army, and of course Johnny Lujack from Notre Dame. So those 3 consecutive Heisman Trophy winners.
Hmm.
And then after he completed he graduated, then he did his Navy service, and and he fought in the Korean War, served in the Korean War. He was a submarine commander, and then later he did service on battleships. And then after the war was over, he really loved the Navy, but he got a little tired of the sort of regimented in nature of a military life, and so he decided to resign from the Navy, and then he was trying to figure out what his next move was, and so he had the opportunity to go to Harvard Business School, and it was all going to be paid for under the GI Bill, and so he
Wow.
started there in 1954, and you want to hear a funny story about what it was like back then. I remember he was telling me a story about how he got to Harvard Business School, and my uncle was who had actually also served in the Army during World War II, was at Boston College Law School. So we went to visit my uncle, and he was like, I'm trying to figure out what my next move is. My uncle said to him, "There's this place in Cambridge, Mass, called the Human Engineering Laboratory, and what they do is they help people figure out, career guidance. So you take some tests, and then." They give you an idea of where to go. So he goes down there. There's a guy there. He takes tests with the guy, and the guy says, we need a day to calculate your results. They didn't have computers like we have now. It's
Hmm.
1954. He
Hmm.
says, come back tomorrow at this time, tomorrow afternoon. So next day, my father shows up, and the guy sits down with him. He says, okay, based on your test results, we've come up with 2 ideas for you. So idea number one is you should either be a director or a producer of television. So, it's the golden age of TV, 1954.
Yeah.
I Love
Yeah.
Lucy. My father's like,
Hmm.
TV? Are you kidding me? What do I know about TV? And my father says, what's the second one? Well, you should be a business executive. You have an acumen for business and work for, a large corporation. So my dad says, well, how do you get a job like that? And the fellow says, well, if you go to Harvard Business School and graduate with an MBA from there, you can get a job. And, I happen to be friendly with the guy who runs the admissions office. Let me give him a call. So
Wow.
10 minutes later, the guy comes back. He goes, Joe, my father's name was Joe too. The guy's waiting for you. So just go on over there and chat with him. So my father goes over, sits down with the gentleman, and Mike tells his story. My father, and he says to my dad, he goes, "Here's the application. Why don't you go out in the hallway and just, fill this out?" So my father goes, "Okay." So goes out in the hallway and he's sitting there on a bench and he fills it out. An hour later, he comes back and he hands it to him. The guy looks at it. He goes, "Okay, this looks great. We'll see you in the fall." And
Wow.
that's how my father got accepted to Harvard Business School.
That's crazy.
Nuts. It's nuts. But you think about it. It's the early '50s. We had won the
Yeah.
war, two wars, and our country was just anything you could do for GIs coming out of the military. So he
Plus, college wasn't what it is, today.
Yes.
Back then.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So he graduated from Harvard, and then he'd worked for a number of companies: General Motors, Control Data, RCA, you name it. He was moving all around the country. And he was not particularly happy about it. And then when he met my mom in '63, they got married, and then he started having a family. And then in '68, '69, he started thinking to himself, he was working for Travelers Insurance in Hartford, Connecticut at the time, and he had a middle management job, and he wasn't happy. And then he had an epiphany. He said, I'm 46 years old, and I got a wife and 2 kids, and these guys at some point in time are going to decide to replace me with someone half my age at half my salary, and then I'm going to be in Schitt's Creek, and so I've got to do something. And he had always wanted to own his own business, because when he was a kid growing up during the Depression, he really had a lot of entrepreneurial instincts. He was shined shoes, and he sold newspapers, and he was just always had a mind for, this is an opportunity to make money. And so, that was his spirit. And so he went to, he sat down with this gentleman who was there's this organization called SCORE. Have you ever heard of this
Yeah.
organization?
Yep.
So for your audience, Senior Corps of Retired Executives, SCORE. And these are executives who had run companies. Now they're retired, and they want to help young entrepreneurs by giving them mentorship and guidance. So he sat down with this one gentleman in Hartford, and the fellow said to him, you should think about franchising, a business and a franchise. And in the late '60s, that was all the rage. That was a hot thing, and like the internet in the '90s. So. And that fellow said to him, there's this professor at the business school at Boston College, and he knows everything there is to know about franchising. Go visit that guy. So my dad visited the professor, and the professor said to him, "Oh, you'd be a great candidate for McDonald's. Go give them a call." So my dad called the McDonald's franchising department. Actually, was on the phone with Ray Kroc. Right, the man himself. And Ray's like, "Joe, are you kidding me? Football hero from Navy, Korean War vet, Harvard MBA. Of course we want you to be a franchisee. You're in." And my father goes, "Great, when can I get started?" "Well, we have a backlog of franchisees, so we can't get you started for 3 years." And my father goes, 3 years? I don't have 3 years. I'll be 50 years old. I don't want I don't want to be doing this at 50. So he goes back to the professor and says, "That guy says he's not going to be able to take me for 3 years. What do I do now?" And the professor said, "Oh, wait a minute. There's this other thing. It's called Burger King, and it's just as good, about the same size and so forth. I know the fellow over there. Let me hook you up with him." So my father spoke to the director of franchising for Burger King, and that fellow said, "Joe, we'd love to have you. And here's our situation. We're building 2 corporate stores right now, but you can have one of them. That can be your first store." And my father says, "Where are they located?" And one's in Seneca Falls, New York, up like in the Rochester area. It's a beautiful part of the country, but it's kind of like out there, And then Somerville, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston. So growing up in Massachusetts, my father always kind of considered himself a Boston boy. He said, "I'll drive up and look at Seneca Falls, but I think I'm probably going to end up going with Somerville," which he did. And so he, did his training and went down to Miami for 3 weeks, went to Whopper College, as they called it, and learned everything there was to know. Four pickles, a swirl of ketchup, onions on the Whopper, and then and he did. And it's funny. He was telling me a story once. He says, when you're going through your training, Burger King requires you to do 3 weeks in classroom training. Then you got to do like 400 hours working in the store.
Jeez, that's a quarter of a year.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot. It was a lot at the time. I think they may have amended it a little bit because a lot of franchisees that they get are people who are like, they were either working in the corporation or they were like a second, people who come from the system. But back then, that's what they were doing. And so how he filled that time was, during the day, he was working at Travelers, but at night, there was a local franchisee there in Connecticut who said, "Sure, Joe, you can, you can work at my store here and do your hours." And he said, every once in a while, one of the people from his office would come in and they would do like "Is that Joe? What are you doing making French fries?" And then, he finally had to tell people, like, I bought one of these. I'm getting ready to open it. And he opened the first one May 10th, 1970, and I remember that date because the Bruins won the Bruins won the Stanley Cup that day. So it was a big day in Boston between his Burger King and the Bruins. And that was the launching point.
That's amazing story. And it's almost serendipitous too, that it just kind of like everything fell in line for him in a way, between the Harvard gig to getting lined up with the actual franchise people at not only McDonald's, but Ray Kroc himself, but also at Burger King. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So grew it to 10, and how many years did it take to grow to 10 before you kind of took over?
Well, he took a long time building that sort of initial 3, particularly when he decided that, okay, I'm going to own my own real estate. And so if I'm going to make a financial commitment, then it has to be really, really good. So he opened the first one in 1970, the second one in 73. He didn't open the third one until 79. It took him 5.5 years. And the reason why it took him so long is because, he was scouting out a lot of sites. He was doing a lot of due diligence on markets, and it took him a lot of time. And then he finally honed in on this one market in central Massachusetts. Milford, Massachusetts is the town.
Yep.
And the Interstate 495 had just opened up, and so it was kind of all new country out there. It was aggressively growing market, but not quite mature yet. So he honed in on that market. He found one location that he liked, got it under agreement. Then he went to get the permits, the approvals. We call it in real estate the entitlements. Got shot down by the city, and he tried like 3 times, and every time you get shot down, you have to wait like 3 more months before you can come back. It burns up a lot of time. And and if you're a real estate developer in Massachusetts, that's one of the things that just and I know Illinois, Chicago, Cook County's much the same way. It's you better be ready to give a pound of flesh if you want to get anything done or built. And so he found his first location there, couldn't get it approved, and so he said, "All right, I can't build here. Town won't let me build here." Found another location, went through the same thing, and then got shot down again. Then he finally found this one location that was 3.5 acres, right at the exit off of 495. Is owned by the Archdiocese of Boston. So Archdiocese, Massachusetts Catholic Church. They were supposed to build a church there, and then they decided not to. So my father, if he were here, he would say, "Well, I made a deal with the bishop, and so we're buying the property." And so he bought that in 1978, and then it took about 6 months to do all the construction through the winter and so forth, because the site had some interesting site work, because it had a brick running through it. And then he opened it in the spring of 1979, and it was a huge success. And so So, at that point, then he's like, okay, so now we're a real estate company because we own the real estate and we're still operating our Burger Kings. And then once he had that infrastructure down, and over that time, he was also developing people. He hired a really good controller. He was training his operations person. Because one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that you need to do if you're going to build a multi-unit operation and it's going to be successful, it's you very quickly, as soon as you can, economically afford it, you have to bring some people in to help you.
Absolutely.
First and foremost, you got to start with a really great operations person.
Mm-hmm.
And you say to this person, you go, okay, listen, this is the plan. Together, we're going to build the culture of this company because that's the foundation of the whole business. You're going
Mm-hmm.
to manage the day-to-day, the operations, and while you're doing that, I'm going to go build the rest of the business. I'm going to go
Mm-hmm.
either build new restaurants or I'm going to make deals with existing franchisees who want to sell for whatever reason, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
grow the company together. So he was taking the time to do that. But once, after he got the third restaurant open in '79, he kind of went in rapid fire. And, in '80, he built one. 1981, he built one. '82, he built two. '83, so we went bang. It took him a long time to get to three, but he blinked his eyes, and then he went from three to like eight
Mm-hmm.
over the course of 4 years. And
All owning the real estate at the same time.
all owning the real estate at the same
That's
time.
phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah, and it is phenomenal when you consider some of the markets that he went into because, in the entitlement story. I mean, he built a Burger King, and it's still there in South Boston at the corner of D Street and Broadway. The infamous neighborhood of Boston where Ray Donovan grew up. Okay,
Mm, okay.
and and in order to get that approved, my father learned the art of managing politics. So he was great friends with a local Congressman, Joe Moakley, and then Senate President, the Massachusetts Senate President at the time, Billy Bulger.
Mm-hmm.
White, Whitey's brother, you know,
Wow.
and Bill and Billy was a great man. Well, I mean, he's still alive, but he was a great man, honest, above board, very decent fellow, and nothing obviously like his nefarious brother, but
Mm-hmm.
and he was very kind to my father, and he took a liking to my dad. And but when I tell people, I go, "Geez, my dad had to make a deal with Billy Bulger in order to get that restaurant open." People are like, "Are you kidding me?" And then I have a picture in my archives of my dad and Billy standing there when they did the ribbon cutting to open that restaurant.
Mm.
And it's one of those interesting things. But people ask me all the time, how the heck did your dad get that thing open there? Because it's so difficult to get anything done in Boston, particularly in South Boston. And I just said my dad just made friends because that's what you need to
Mm-hmm.
do. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's what he did. He built one in South Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Also, oh my God, Cambridge, home of Harvard and MIT,
Yeah.
and some of the most brilliant people in the world. But I'll tell you, it's you're trying to get these approvals. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
So by that time, you took over by the time he had 10, and then you grew it to an additional four.
Right.
And I assumed at that point, have you exited the business?
Well, how I came into the business when I was, about 12 years old. So, right about the time that he was getting ready to open his third Burger King, I was very interested in working in the business, and so
Mm-hmm.
I spent my summers working in the Burger Kings. I take the subway into Boston from our hometown out in the suburbs, and then another year there was a Burger King closer to home, and I was riding my bike there 10 miles each way back and forth.
Mm.
And so, I really developed this affinity and an affection for the business. And so by the time I got to be about sophomore, junior in high school, I said, I really enjoy this and I want to do this. I have an affinity for it. I enjoy it. And so, I was a pretty good football player in high school, and I
Mm-hmm.
was getting recruited by a number of the Ivies, and Cornell, certainly with its hotel school, was my top choice, and I was very fortunate that I was getting recruited there, and I was able to get accepted there. So Went to Cornell. I was there from 85 to 89, graduated in 1989. And then while I was there, my dad had said to me while I was heading off to Cornell, he said, while you're there, he says, we got the Milford property. We bought 3 acres there, but we only used half for the Burger King. We should think about something else to do with the other half, the other acre and
Sure.
a half.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, when you're up there, why don't you start talking to your professors up there about hotels? Maybe it's a good hotel site. And that would be probably complementary use with the Burger Kings. And I said, okay, I got my marching orders. So while I was up there, of course, that's what I'm doing. I start talking to everybody. My professors, I had this one professor who I loved so much. I said, you need to be my advisor. His name was Bob Chase. And he ran this class called the basics of hotel operations, and really fantastic. Just breaks it all down on this is how you manage revenue and occupancy, how you walk a guest. This is and soup to nuts. Had other professors who were like, if you want to build a hotel, this is how you finance it. This
Mm-hmm.
is how you manage a construction project. I mean, very, very comprehensive. And so my every summer when you're at Cornell, they require at the hotel school, they require you to work in the industry, particularly, and you have to fulfill a certain number of hours. So, and they want you especially to work in an industry if you didn't have experience with it. So, by the time I got there, they're like, you've done your hours, your restaurant hours, working in your dad's Burger Kings. Now we want you to work all in hotels for the next 4 summers. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this summer between my freshman and sophomore year, um, there were these 2 sisters who were at the hotel school with me, and their father owned this chain of hotels, the Koala Inns, in and around Boston. And so I said, hey, can you guys help me get a job in one of your dad's places in the summer for this? Of course, Joe. So I was working the front desk. I was working the front desk at the Koala Inn in Framingham, Massachusetts, on Route 9, and you know, and a lot of times they would have me work the 3 to 11 shift, the night shift, which was fine. And so when you're working the front desk, they have you do this thing called the call arounds, which is it's a phone list of all the hotels in the area, and you call, hi, this is Joe from the Koala Inn. And how are you guys doing tonight? Do you still have rooms available? Yeah, Joe, we have 10 rooms available, or we're sold out. And they're like, okay, we have rooms available. So if you have to walk a guest, send them over to us. And it's an industry tradition, if you will. So every night I would do the call around, and most of the hotels are like, oh, we're at 50%, 60%, whatever, but there was always one hotel that was, well, we're sold out again, and that was the Red Roof Inn in Natick, Massachusetts, which was one exit down from the Massachusetts Turnpike. And so every night they're sold out, sold out, sold out. And so I'm like, and I'm saying to myself, geez, what is so great about? I had never been to a Red Roof Inn, had never even heard of it, seen it. So one night when I called, the fellow who answered the phone, he thought, oh, we're sold out. And I said, hey, can I ask you a question? And he said, sure, shoot. So I said, you guys are sold out every night. And I said, I'm just curious why that is. I said, and I told her, I said, I'm a student at Cornell, Cornell studying hotel administration, and I'm trying to learn all about this stuff. Well, the guy who answered the phone his name was Blair Thomas, and he was actually the general manager. He was filling in for a sick front desk clerk that night. And so he said, well, geez, I'm the GM. And so we had a nice like half-hour phone conversation, and we chatted a little bit about the business. He said, Joe, would you like to come by and see the hotel? I'd be happy to take you on a tour, show you around. I said, oh my God, I'd love that. And he says, come by tomorrow. Come by at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm happy to show you around. I said, is it okay if I bring my dad? He goes, bring your dad. So I get home that night, and I tell my dad about the conversation. My dad says, oh great, let's go take a tour. So we go over, and of course he's got an incredible location. He's right off he's right next to the toll booth of exit 12 of the Massachusetts Turnpike, I-90. It is just it's the bottom of a sales funnel, if you will,
Yeah. Yeah.
and And clean rooms, basic stick. In the hotel industry, we call it stick. If you build a hotel out of wood frame, we call it stick.
Sure. Yep.
So, basic stick construction, all rooms, no a big lobby, no frills, nothing. Cheap rates, clean rooms. And they just, and they weren't in the selling business; they were in the taking orders business. And so, my father and I come out of there, and we go, and he says, "Well, what do you think, Joey?" And I said, "Well, I don't know if I'd want to build a red roof in, Dad. I mean, that's very nice, but it's very kind of, it's very
Basic.
basic. I think I used the word Spartan. My dad said basic. I said, I think we want to do something a little bit more upscale." And he agreed. So we had been getting we were having a dialogue with the parent company of Choice Hotels, so Comfort Inns, and my dad, and we had been very successful being Burger King franchisees. My dad said, let's try being hotel franchisees. So we toured around, and we went to Marriott's headquarters in Bethesda, Maryland, and then we went to Choice Hotels headquarters. I think they were also in DC, and they were touring us around to see some of these various Comfort Inns that are in the area owned by franchisees. And there were nice properties, but they were certainly a little bit more luxurious, if you will, than the Red Roof Inn, but nothing to lose your mind over. But there was something that happened that triggered something in my dad. And what it was is that we were sitting down having a coffee in one of the Comfort Inns, and the guy from corporate who was showing us around, he looked at the carpet and he says, he goes, I told him that he had to replace this carpet in the coffee room, and he hasn't done it, and so I'm going to have a conversation with him. I'm going to have to kick his ass right now. And so he walked away, and it triggered a thought in my father's mind, like, he said, here's this guy, he's this franchisee, and he has spent obviously many millions of dollars building and operating this hotel, and this corporate guy, I won't say corporate lackey, but I'm sure your audience is probably plugging that word in.
Yeah.
Is like saying he's going to kick his ass. He should be like, we're so grateful that you're a steward of the brand, and can you please make this investment in a new carpet? So we get out of there, and we're in the car heading back to the hotel, and my dad says to me, he says, I think, he says, I have a thought. Let me bounce this off you. I'm like, okay. My father and I, we always had this ongoing strategic dialogue from when I was the age of 14 up until the day he died, and so he said, I think this might be an idea, and he says, why don't we build our own hotel with our own brand name? We hire a really good architect, build the whole thing ourselves, and let's see how it goes. And if for whatever reason we can't make it, we can always go buy a flag. That's what they call the franchises in the hotel industry. Yep. We can go buy a flag and convert it later. But let's give ourselves a shot and see how it makes out. And I said, you know what, Dad? Let's do that.
That's a good plan.
Yeah. And so that was like my sophomore year, into my sophomore year at Cornell. And he says, when you get up to school, start talking, getting some recommendations, figure out what we need to do. So I did, and my professor said, first thing you got to do is you got to get a feasibility study done. And feasibility studies, get a hotel expert. They come in, they do an analysis, and they write a big report. The whole thing costs, I think back then it was like $7,500. Today, if you get it done, it's like $30,000.
Sure.
And then they tell you, yeah, this is a great site for a hotel, or it's not a great site for a hotel. You need this thing in order to get any bank financing. A bank will not finance it without a feasibility study. So we had that done, came back and said, yes, this is a strong site for a hotel, and we would recommend a property that's anywhere from 75 to 100 rooms. Great. Our first hotel was 92 rooms. So we got some references, some referrals for hotel design and architectural companies, and so we hired this architecture firm, a Hearn and Schaffner out of Boston, and they designed our first hotel in Milford, Massachusetts, next to our Burger King. They had built a string of 12 other hotels prior to ours, and they've done many others since. And there was this one brand called the Swiss Chalet, which that was like a regional brand. They made these hotels that had this sort of like, Swiss ski resort chalet, and you're like, ooh,
Yeah.
and you know, you go into the front desk, and perhaps the front desk clerk's dressed like a Fraulein, with the braids, and and so they did a wonderful job, and we went through construction, and my last 2 years at Cornell, I'm meeting with Professor Chase, I'm meeting with the other professors, I'm running around the school with the plans in my hands, and people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm building a hotel,
Yeah.
and I'll never.
And you're probably the only one at Cornell that's doing
That's
this.
right, Bo. That's right. Because it was one day I'm in there with Professor Chase, and I had my plans out on this big table in his office, and we're going, and he goes, all right, what's the problem? I'm like, we got an issue here. We got a boiler over here, and it's vibrate. And the engineers are going to say we're going to vibrate. What do we do? And he looks at me. He goes, Joe. He goes, do you know how many students I have that are building hotels right now? And I go, I don't know, what, 3 or 4? He goes, none, you're it. He goes, do you know how exciting this is? I'm like, oh boy. So it was fun. And at one point I remember we were working on something in the plans, and he goes like this. He got this little glint in his eye, like an elf. He goes, let's bring this to the class. So we brought it in and put it on the table. He goes, class, come down here. We got to help Joe with his hotel. And it was, and they're all students. They're like, do that, you do that. And it was all great stuff. But it took us 2 years to get, through entitlements, get it designed, get it approved, get it financed, get it constructed, and then get it opened. And we opened it in June 12th, 1989. 1989 was an amazing year for me because there was a period of 27 days, or 28 days, I think it was. So May 28th, I graduated from Cornell. June 12th, we opened our first hotel, and then June 24th of that year, I got married. And
Wow.
so
That's a busy month.
it was a busy month. And at the time, I think to myself, I look back on that, I go, geez, you were a busy guy, Joe. I tell people that they're always like, oh my God, what were you doing? But I'm like,
Yeah.
keeping it going. But the hotel, we got it open, and it did really, really well. So we're running it under our own brand name, Tage Inn. The first month we were open, we did 72% occupancy.
Wow, that's really good for hotels.
It was amazing. And it's like we don't have a recognized brand. We don't have a central reservation system. The building, those guys, Ahern and Schaffner, they designed such a gorgeous hotel. People were like, whoa, look at that place.
Yeah.
And people would start, and immediately we had real estate developers calling us. I want to buy a franchise. I want to buy a franchise. That you guys are selling franchises, right? That's a franchise brand hotel. It looked like a franchise brand hotel, but we weren't.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, we eschewed quite a few inquiries, which in the end I wish we had not. I wish we had said, yes, we'll sell you a franchise. Let's get to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I obviously probably also helped the Burger King as well. That was in the outlot. So then your Burger King revenue increased as well.
Yes. Yep. It ended up being a destination place where people would say, it was always amazing that I would run into people sometimes, and they would go, particularly people from like Connecticut and New York, and or New Jersey, and they go, oh, you own that Burger King, that hotel? I said, yeah. And they go, when we're driving to the Cape, that's our stop. That's our stop. Over the course of my life, I must have heard that at least a dozen times from various people. So it got to be known as that place. Yeah.
So 1989, you opened the first hotel.
Yes.
Are you basically running? You graduated Cornell, you got married, all in a month's time.
Yep.
Are you are you running the hotel brand, and your dad is still running the Burger King franchises, or how does that look? What's that split look like?
Well, my dad, although I was very instrumental in getting the hotel open, I'm just fresh out of college and 23 years old, and my father is, and I'm like, what do you want me to do? You want me to run the hotels? And he goes, no. He goes, you need to learn every aspect of this business from the ground up. He goes, I know you've been working in the Burger Kings all the summers, but now you gotta kick up your game. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I don't know what that means. So he put me through this very rigorous training program. I spent 6 months working in our corporate office with all of our accounting people, our controller,
Mm-hmm.
managing cash flow, payables, you name it. I mean, it was just,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, what I want you to do is, he goes, we need a manual of operations for everything in the administrative office. I want you to put that together. So I learned more about accounting than I had ever known or care to know. Uh, and then after that, he had me running individual Burger Kings for a while. I had my keys and my blue shirt, my blue pants,
Wow.
and I was getting to become a turnaround guy. I don't think I was particularly good at it, but he would throw me in the deep end of the pool and say swim. I'm like, I'm drowning, but
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But it was hard work, but I learned the business, and then I elevated to where I was managing. I was participating in the management of the hotel, but then managing a small portfolio of my dad's Burger Kings. And then he was like, okay, and then he said, you got to go through your franchise training. You have to become a franchisee because we got to start to put a succession plan in for this.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing all of that. And then in October of 1990, we had something really tragic happen, and that was the general manager of our first hotel. His name was Doug Renko. He had a heart attack and died suddenly at 38
Oh
years
wow.
old. And Doug was just
38.
38, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And Doug was just such an amazing guy. He was a great guy, just kind and smart, and just, he was the sort of guy that you loved working with him at the
Mm-hmm.
business, and then he'd be like, "Come on, let's go get some pork dumplings." And
Yeah.
and every Chinese restaurant there was like, "Oh, Mr. Doug," and so
Uh-huh.
and so and so he was so fun to be around. And so he and I would talk about plans like we're going to build more hotels, and he
Mm-hmm.
had been, prior to joining our company, he had been with Holiday Inn, the Holiday Inn Corporation, for a number of years, and I think he had been a part of their opening team, and I think he had opened something like 8 or 12 hotels. I mean,
Okay.
he was a journeyman, and so when it came time to open our hotel, he marched the troops. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. I mean, he ran that thing brilliantly,
Mm-hmm.
and so when he died, it was a real shock to our company and our family. And then, my father pulled me aside and he said, and I'll never forget this. The night we went to Doug's funeral, and then that night, I was home, and I was, with my wife and my son Joey, who's 35 now. He was a baby, and so it was kind of a sad day. And my father calls me at home that night, and he said, he goes, it's awful that Doug died, but we've got to think about the business now. And I said, okay. And he said, we don't have anybody else to run that hotel, Joey. And we have every single thing that we own, we are mortgaged up to our eyeballs. So if that hotel
Mm-hmm.
goes down, we're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to go in there. You're the only guy who has any experience managing hotels.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go in and take over the management. So, and when he said experience managing hotels, what he would have been referring to is my junior year at Cornell. Cornell's hotel school has an amazing internship program. And so the second semester of my junior year, I had an opportunity to go work for the Marriott company at one of their biggest hotels, the Boston Marriott Copley Place. 1,200 rooms, 2,500 employees, 27,000 square feet of ballroom space. I mean, this thing was a machine.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there for 9 months, and they put me in every single department in the hotel. And so I really, it was hotel ops boot camp.
Hmm.
And so my dad said to me, he goes, you're the guy. You've got the ball. If you got to get in there, you got to take over. You got to you got to steer the ship and stabilize it. Otherwise, we're in trouble. And so from there, I was focusing strictly on that. Was able, luckily, Doug had hired some really wonderful people, and they were very good. They were all very upset, but they were very good at you know, filling the vacuum, as it were, at the time. And so we were able to
Hmm.
stabilize the hotel, keep the operation going. But the thing that was great about that was it was a learning experience because it really helped me to figure out, we weren't just running a hotel, but we were also running a brand, and so we were trying to figure
Hmm.
product market
Hmm.
fit
Yep.
and how to differentiate ourselves and so forth because we're like creating, we don't have a central reservation system, so what are we going to do instead,
Hmm.
and how do you do sales, and how do you manage groups and all sorts of things. And
Which is nice for a franchise because a franchise, not only do they teach you that stuff, but if they do any kind of promotion or marketing effort, they're beta testing it in their own corporate stores and they'll tell you what works and then they pass it down. But when
yes,
you have your own brand, you're doing that on your own.
exactly.
And
that's
it's a lot of ABCD testing.
that's exactly right, Bo. I mean, it's exactly so. Like Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I don't know. I'm figuring this out as we're going along. And
Yeah,
so,
right.
there was a lot of that, and but it was good because we had to use muscles that we didn't know we had, and if we had a
Hmm.
franchise playbook, we probably would not have ever used,
Yeah.
and that certainly made us better. And so when we were competing against brands, we had some what I thought were very strong competitive advantages.
Hmm.
We can do something creative here that they can't do because we're not guardrailed by the
Yep.
franchise agreement.
Yep.
And
Yep.
more than once, I would use the line. My salesperson would call me and go, "I'm trying to close this guy, and I'm having a hard time, and I need you to come in with the Mr. Tage line." So
Hmm.
I would go and so I'd go visit somebody, maybe be a corporate client who's got like 10 rooms a week every week for the whole year. So that's a big piece of business. And I said, what am I going to
Hmm.
have to do to close you? Well, we're still waiting on a bid from Marriott. And I go, well, Mr. Marriott's not sitting here in front of you, but Mr. Tage is. What do you say you go
Hmm.
with Mr. Tage? And
Hmm.
9 times out of 10 that would close the deal. And that was the advantage that we had.
I want to rewind for a second. I'm curious. You work hand in hand with your dad, which I think is amazing. That you and your father were like this great partnership, building not only the Burger Kings but also the hotel brand.
Yeah.
Um, when and then you're spending all of this energy and time building this hotel and this new brand, and then you graduate Cornell, and he tells you go to work at the Burger King
Yeah.
and not the
Yeah.
hotel. Weren't you like a little resentment there where you're like, damn it, I just worked my ass off building this hotel and now you're telling me to go work in the burger joint?
Bo, more than once I said to my father, Dad, are you bleeping kidding me? You know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, but I said, all right. But he was always very logical, and he had this line I remember. He says, Joey, this is a nickel and dime business. If you don't know where the nickels and dimes are, you're going to lose the dollars. And so you
Hmm.
need to do that.
Hmm.
And he had done that himself, running his very first Burger King. And he's a guy with a Harvard MBA, and I'm like, all right, he's got a
Hmm.
Harvard MBA. What the hell am I complaining about? I'm gonna go in there and do the
Sure.
work. And but it was very it was again it was another exercise in using muscles that I didn't know I had,
Hmm.
and I had many failures.
Hmm.
It's I always tell people, I said, if you're someone who can successfully manage a fast food restaurant, you can probably manage just about anything because
Hmm.
it is a lot of work. It's got a lot of moving pieces. It's a business that
Hmm.
never stops and takes a break.
A lot of personnel too.
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes. And then when I meet people and they're like, or I read stories about some of these franchisees or these franchise operators that are operating Chick-fil-A's. A
Hmm.
Chick-fil-A, The average Burger King does $1.6 million in sales. The average McDonald's does $4 million.
Wow.
The average Chick-fil-A does $9.5 million in sales.
Holy shit.
Yes, yes, yeah. It's
What kind of margins do a lot of these fast food places work at?
I think a well-managed fast food restaurant will produce about 12.5 to 13% EBITDA,
Okay.
of sales. I think something like a Chick-fil-A, that's probably closer to 18 or 20% because they're just the sales levels are so much higher, they eclipse the fixed cost at such an accelerated rate.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is about Chick-fil-A, when I tell people that number, they're like, "Oh my God, 9.5 million? Are you kidding me?" And I go, "Yeah, let me add a few more nuances to this to even blow your mind even further."
Mm-hmm.
The Chick-fil-A is owned by the Cathy family, and they are devoutly Baptist. So every Sunday, every,
Off.
closed. They
Yep.
they don't care. It's
Yep.
closed.
Yep.
So they're only working on 6 days out of 7.
Yeah.
And that average includes some of their food court stores. That's where they started, in food courts, and the food courts
Oh.
only do like 6 million. Well, 6 million in a food court's exceptional. So, but you say
Mm-hmm.
in the case of this discussion, you say 6 million in the food courts. So what are the drive-through stores doing? Well, they're doing like 11, 10, 12. Where I am up here in just north of Boston, there's a community, Woburn, Massachusetts. If you're from Boston, Woburn. But but if you're from Chicago, I have some great friends from Chicago, and they come to Boston, they go Woburn or
Yeah.
Worcester. No, it's
Yeah.
Worcester. And
Yeah.
and so, but that Chick-fil-A is doing based on the data that I have, $19.5 million. One chicken
Jeez.
restaurant. Yeah,
That's insane.
yeah,
And you know what? I knew somebody that owns some McDonald's franchises, and he had told me, he's like, Bo, it's a volume game.
yeah,
You can't survive on just one because the margins are actually not there.
yeah.
Like if you're saying a good fast food place is doing 12% EBITDA margin,
Mm-hmm.
that means that their net margin is definitely, sub 10,
Right,
maybe even 5-6%,
right,
right? Net margin. That is, if you're doing $1 million a year, let's say $2 million a year
right.
in sales, you're talking $100,000 in net income.
Yeah.
Like, but your exposure is huge.
Yes,
Not only is your exposure huge, but there is, at that margin, there is no room for error.
that's right.
None.
Yeah,
No room.
yeah, yeah. That's absolutely right, Bo. And so that's why when you go to become a franchisee of any of these franchise brands, they're encouraging you to to build many more and have multiple units. And I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's I have a good friend of mine from high school. These two brothers are good friends of mine from high school. They own 40 Jiffy Lubes in Connecticut.
Wow.
And they started they bought out this retiring franchisee who had like 15, and so they bought his, and so that gave them a good jump start, and then they added
Mm-hmm.
many more afterwards. So they have a really nice business. And you say, okay, so it's a volume business, and so your friend, as he's saying that, that's based on 2 points of volume. One is individual volume at the units. The higher the sales level, yes, the more profit at that individual unit. But it's also based on number of units. So you want to have volume, that you want to have many, many more
Correct.
units. Because
Right.
if you own, like when we had our 14 Burger Kings, we used to call them the superstars, the superstars, the cash cows, and then the journeymen. And
Mm-hmm.
so the
Mm-hmm.
journeymen would just break even and cover their overhead, and so
Mm.
support a lot of our administrative stuff. The cash cows would make some money, but the superstars would just like, I remember once I said to myself, I said, these 3 Burger Kings, if we didn't have all this other overhead, would produce as much cash as the whole entire system.
Wow.
And so that's some that has to do with the business. And people ask me, they go, why do you think that is? And I go, well, because if you have a Burger King and it's doing $3.5 million, or you have a Burger King that's doing $1.6 million, let's assume they're in similar geographic places. They each have a $50,000 franchise fee, and they each cost like, $100 a square foot to build. So
Yeah.
their fundamental fixed costs are both the same, but this one's got higher volume, and they're
Yep.
pushing a lot of, they're little food factories, and so they're
Hmm.
pushing a lot more throughput through the food factory. That's the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Complete sense. And that's why, like you said, you got to scale to multiple units if you want to be
Yeah.
successful. Um, and it gets also to like first rule of real estate: location, location, location. You know,
Yeah.
you got to really have a good location that's going to drive that volume to be able to do the profits that you're going to need to be able to scale a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same in the hotel business. So then how many hotel units did you guys scale to?
We we uh, uh, we added three more hotels to our portfolio, and
Mm.
we bought one out of foreclosure in 1992 during the RTC crisis. And the bank that had financed our first hotel, they called us and they go, we're getting shooken down by the Resolution Trust Corporation. We got shitty hotels on our balance sheet. We got to get them off of here." And so, we said, "All right, well, we'll take one of them off your hands." And that was our second hotel in Andover, Massachusetts, was 188 rooms. And you remember that family that gave me the job,
Yeah.
the Koala Inn? That was the family that owned that one. It was
Oh,
the
really?
Koala Inn in Andover, Massachusetts. And so that fell into foreclosure. And the bank said, "We have a $6.5 million note on this. It's not even worth the paper it's written on.
Hmm.
If you want it, we'll sell it to you for 3.2 million. We'll give you a 2.2 million dollar fresh 2.2 million dollar mortgage. You guys got to come up with $1 million."
Hmm.
Well, my dad and I didn't have the million, and I tell this story. I was sitting in my house that my wife and I had just bought like a few months earlier, and we had no furniture because bought this house, and we were a young couple. We've got a table, a TV, a table with some chairs, a sofa, my son's toys because he was a little baby at the time, all over the
Uh-huh.
place,
Uh-huh.
but no furniture. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking and I'm saying to myself, if I took a second mortgage out on this thing, I wonder what I could get for that second mortgage. And so I called my dad. It was late at night. I go, "Dad, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, what if I took a second mortgage on my house to pull some cash out for the million?" And my dad goes, "Would you want to do that?" And I said, "Yeah. I mean, how are we going to, Dad, it's 188 rooms, 3.2 million for Christ's sake. That's a steal. We're
Yeah.
stealing that property. We got to get it." And he said, "What do you think you're going to get?" I said, "I don't know, 300, 350, maybe." And he says, "Maybe we could get that out of yours." He goes, "I bet I could get 400 or 500 out of my house." I'm like, "Dad, you take a second mortgage on your house?" He said, "Sure." Now my dad's 68 years old at the time. Okay. Okay.
He should be retiring.
Exactly. I tell people this story and they're like, "Are you shitting me?" I'm like, "Nope." The old man was running and gunning right up till the end.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I bet I could do that too." So we went to the bank and we said, "This is what we're thinking." So they came out and did an appraisal. We go, we'll give 400 on Joe Jr.'s house. We'll give 500 on Joe Sr.'s house. And then my dad said, "Well, Joey, we'll scrape the rest out of the Burger King." So we were able to put the million together.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that when I was on the phone, my father says to me, he goes, "How does Romy feel about that?" And Romy's my wife, my amazing wife of 36 years.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you very much. But I will give you a caveat, Bo. She she has not made me a franchise player, but she continues to renew my 1 year contract. So, so but she's certainly the best decision I've ever made in my life. But in any event, I went to her and I go, "Honey, listen, let me tell you what's going on here, right? My dad and I, we're trying to buy this hotel, and I'm thinking about taking a second mortgage on this house. He's going to take a second mortgage on his house, and we're going to put the money together for a down payment. And he wants to know, and I want to know, are you okay with that?" And she says, "Well, your dad thinks it's a good idea." And I said, "Yes." He goes, "You think it's a good idea?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, well, if this doesn't work out, what's going to happen? I go, we're going to move back in with your parents, you know? and, and so she said, okay, well, if you two guys think it's a good idea, go ahead. And I mean, she was standing in the kitchen with Joey on her hip. All this was all going on, my son, Joey.
Amazing.
And it was by far the best decision we ever made. So we bought that hotel. We were able to, it needed a major renovation, but we were able to scrape together just a few bucks to, you know, put in new mattresses and paint it and seal coat and stripe the driveway. And it took us about 3 years to really turn that thing around where it was starting to produce healthy cash flow. And then, you know, a few years later, we did a major renovation and really revamped the thing, and then it just took off like a rocket ship.
Amazing.
And the thing that was great about that is, and you know, other people's problems are your opportunities.
Yep.
So the property, the hotel was located on 9.2 acres, sitting right on Interstate 93, and right at the exit, in just a big, beautiful piece of property. And on it was a tennis court that nobody used. They built a tennis court, nobody played tennis. It was just a waste of prime space. And so I said to my dad, I said, I'm going to build a restaurant there, okay? And he said, you know, don't waste your time. We got a deed. There was a restaurant next door that we had a deed restriction on, and then had the deed restriction on our property, prevented us from building a restaurant. And I said, I'm going to work on that, Dad. Well, you know, sure enough, about 5 years later, the owner of the restaurant next door, he died. And then his widow sold that restaurant to this other restaurant company that came in, and they were like, they came to me, and the fellow who owned the second restaurant company, his name was Joe Nacera, the Chateau family restaurants. And so he came to me, he said, Joe, I need parking, and you have a huge parking lot. Can I rent parking spaces from you? And I said, I'll do one better from you. You let's kill the deed restriction. Let me build a restaurant over here, and then I'll give you your parking, and then we'll have two restaurants here, but I'll build something that's not a competitor to you. I guarantee it. So he thought about it, and he said, you know what, that might actually work out great, because two restaurants will, you know, sometimes when you have two restaurants, it creates,
Yeah, it brings more.
It brings
Yeah.
more. It attracts people. Now that's a place to go when you have to eat.
Yep.
So he said, what are you thinking about doing? I said, I'm thinking about doing developing a Chili's. He said, that'll be perfect. And so that's what we did. Dan Chandler, who was the head of development for Chili's, I called him, Danny, you ready to go? He's like, Joe, I've been waiting for this call, you know. And so we did a great deal with them in a long-term lease, and I got all the site completely entitled for them, and they came in and did the construction. And that's in Massachusetts, that's one of their top performing Chili's right now. So it's
Wow.
ended up being a great site. But the thing is, you know, we built that on free land.
Yeah.
You know, so it's 100% return. You know, they call it infinite return is what they call it. So it's just just been really a wonderful sort of thing for us because of that.
Now, do you guys still have the hotels and the Burger Kings?
Yes. Yeah. So what happened, so this is, you know, this is a perfect segue into the pivot, I call it. So what had happened was my father had a massive stroke in 1998. And I mean, my father was so tough. I mean, I'll never get the surgeons at the Mass General, like, we have no idea how he's still alive. Honestly, Jesus, this thing would have killed 99% of the other people. And
He's 75 at this point.
exactly, he was 74, almost 75 years old, and he was paralyzed on his left side. 40% of his brain was completely damaged, and so, you know, he retired. And so at that point, I'm running the company, but I have two siblings who own, you know, have ownership in the company. They weren't very active in the business. You know, my sister had worked in our accounting department for a little while, and then she had an interest in the fashion design industry, so she went to FIT and studied fashion design. And then my brother came into the business for a little while, and he he didn't have the affinity for it like I had. He was interested in
Mm-hmm.
other things, and so but he
Mm-hmm.
kept their ownership. And then after he got sick, we kind of had a meeting of the minds, and they said to me, they said, we really, we have a lot of debt and so forth, and keeps us up at night. And we know you want to grow a big business, but we really we don't have, without saying this, that what they were saying is we don't have the appetite for risk and debt like you do, and so what we want it to be is something more, more controlled and stabilized. And I said, okay, well, so my dad had said to me once, he says, if you guys ever get to a point where you can't, figure out, you can't, figure out a meeting of the minds, he said, he goes, you can always sell the Burger Kings and just keep the real estate and become Burger King's landlords.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that, it was just, we were out on my boat one day fishing, and he just sort of like farted that idea out, and when you're a kid, I mean, you grew up with an Italian father, your father talks a lot, and you're listening, sure, Dad, sure, and he,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he does, and they don't think you're listening, but they're listening, and
Mm-hmm.
so I was
Mm-hmm.
listening, and so that kind of idea crept in the back of my head, and I said, okay, why don't we do this? I said, well, let's pivot this to being just a real estate holding company, and that's what we did. So we orchestrated. I went to Burger King Corporation and I said, listen, we're considering the sale of our Burger Kings. Would you want to buy them? And I went to them first because under the franchise agreement they had a right of first
Yep.
refusal. So I said, let me go to them
Correct.
first. If they say no,
Yep.
then I can talk to everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, we absolutely want your Burger Kings. And I said, you know what the caveat is? And they said, yes, we know. You want to keep your real estate. We're happy to become your tenant. So that's what we did. We sold all the Burger Kings, but we kept the real estate, made them our tenants. Did the same thing with our hotel portfolio with La Quinta Hotel Corporation. They bought our
Oh.
hotels, but we did
Okay.
long-term ground leases.
Okay.
And then I told you about the Chili's, that I did the development with Chili's. And then I did build-to-suit developments for 2 other restaurant companies.
Okay.
So we went from having 450 employees down to 5, and then we paid off all of our debt, and then we pivoted into what we are now, which is this, family-held real estate holding company.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so and it works, but I continue to love to advise and coach and teach,
Yeah.
and so
Mm-hmm.
it's good to do stuff.
Okay. So I got to do a hard stop here.
Yes,
Do you mind? Can we do a second session because I am loving this so much? I
sure.
think I have so many more questions.
Yeah.
I could easily do another hour with you if you're up for it.
You know what we call that in Boston, Bo? We call that a two-parter. So we're going to have a two-parter. We're going to do two
We're gonna do
parts.
That's right. That's right. Let's do it. All right, we're back with, as you said, pot 2, as they say in Boston.
It's
a
a
two-parter.
two-parter.
It's a two-parter. I love the Boston accent too. All right, so we had to do a second part because we both had hard stops, but I wanted to follow up. So just to recap, you and the family built this this franchise, Burger King franchise chain to 13 locations.
Mm-hmm.
Also got into the hotel business with your own brand as well.
Yes.
Exited the Burger Kings, exited the hotels as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, we exited all of our operating companies and pivoted, evolved from being a full-blown hospitality development and operations company, fully vertically integrated, into just being a retail, real estate holding company, family-held real estate holding company, and that's what we are right now.
And what year did you guys exit everything again?
So we did a series of about 22 transactions over the course of 5 years. So we did the first with the Burger Kings in 2000, and then we did some others with some full-service restaurants that we had, and then we finalized the hotels at the end of 2004, beginning of 2005, and then after that, we did the development of some build-to-suit developments for some full-service restaurants that became our tenants.
So you guys, for the better part of 20 years, have been operating basically as an investment fund and just investing in various real estate deals, correct?
That's right, and just managing and optimizing, the performance of our portfolio. The thing is when you do these sort of triple net leases, as they call them, they're kind of they kind of run on automatic pilot, so to speak. There's nothing that's completely passive, and but if you have a blue chip tenant like a Burger King Corp or a Brinker International or La Quinta Hotel Corporation, these are professional, publicly traded companies. They don't need you to babysit them. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's great. And so now, what types of asset classes are you in the fund investing in?
So right now we're not looking at anything particular that we're trying to make. There's not any specific acquisitions we're looking at. There are parts of our portfolio that we're looking at right now that after the years have gone by, that the markets around those properties have evolved, and now we're looking at them and saying, perhaps there's a better, higher use for these things. And that's the beauty of owning the real estate. There's a lot of people in franchising who say, don't own the real estate. Don't tie up all your capital in real estate. If you tie up, money that you put into buying the dirt could have been spent on buying more stores or more units. And they're right. Okay, and if that's their strategy and that's their investment ethos, God bless them. But for us, it was really the idea that we want to own our own ground. We want to be our own landlords and our own tenants, and we believe that does two things: it protects us from strategically in the long run from potential predatory landlords, but it also over time gives us a lot of potential redevelopment opportunities. It gives us flexibility. And so we're really looking forward to that as those opportunities within our portfolio. My wife and my daughter sometimes they go clothing shopping, and then I love it when they come and go. They put on a nice outfit. And I go, "Oh, you look gorgeous, honey. Where'd you get those clothes?" And they go, "Dad, I shopped in my own closet." I'm like, "Oh, that's great," And so, if you're looking at properties that you have already in your portfolio, and you're saying, what can we do with these now? Then it's like shopping in your own closet. So we're very excited about it.
Do you think that Burger King is as strong of a franchise now as it was compared to when you guys first got in? Because there's so many, fast food type chains now between Chick-fil-A and Taco Bell has gotten very strong in the last 5 to 10 years. Wendy's, all of these different ones. Do you feel that Burger King is still a competitive franchise in that landscape?
So I'm going to answer that on a somewhat politically correct level.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, Bo, because I know that you love this being a raw, get right to it. Come on, tell us what you're feeling, dude. And I'm like, okay, So, but I think I think Burger King as a brand, it's a classic franchise brand, and it's part of the American landscape, and it always will be. The Whopper is an iconic product.
Sure.
And it always will be. Now the thing is with Burger King, I can't believe this. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's okay.
Now the thing is with Burger King is that the competition has gotten so strong, and I'm very concerned with Burger King that it has not kept up with the competition over the years. And you can see that in its sales. Like the average unit volume for McDonald's right now is a little over $4 million in annual sales. Okay, the average Burger King does about 1.6 million.
Wow.
Yeah, that's quite a disparity. So for 2.5 Burger Kings, you're gonna have one McDonald's. Now the thing is about that is this: so when we sold our portfolio in 2000. The system wide, the average Burger King sales was 1,050,000, and system wide for McDonald's was an average of 1.6 million. So the disparity there was about we'll call 35%, and now it's 250%.
Yeah.
So you say what happened? Well, there's a number of things that happened. First of all, culturally, McDonald's is much more, and always has been, a much more focused, innovative company. I mean, McDonald's considers themselves on a level with a company like Apple or Tesla. We're going to continue to invest and innovate and improve and make things better, and it's shown, and it has shown, and it continues to show. Burger King, unfortunately, my feeling is that it plays catch up. It's trying to keep up. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And then when you combine that with the fact that Burger King has been bought and sold as a brand over the course of the last, say, 25 or 30 years, something like 4 or 5 times. It was It was owned by Grand Metropolitan, then Diageo, and Grand Metropolitan was this big hospitality company. Diageo was this liquor company. It was owned by Pillsbury at one point. It was owned by Bain Capital and TPG. Then they took it public. Then the
TPG owned Burger King?
They owned it jointly with Bain.
And
this was in the mid 2000s, I think. And they bought it, and with the idea of taking it public, which they did. I think they did well with that, taking it public. And then the current owner, Restaurant Brands International, which is backed by this Brazilian private equity group called 3G Capital, which is a really great. They're really great. 3G Capital's got a remarkable track record. They bought Burger King, took it private, and then they formed this company, Restaurant Brands International. And so what they're trying to do is create this stable of brands. So they own Tim Hortons, they own Firehouse Subs, and they also own Popeye's Fried Chicken. And so their probably number one competitor is Yum Brands, which is the parent company of Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, KFC, and Long John Silver, and Yum Brands has done very, very well. So I get concerned, when people ask you about Burger King, and I'm giving you a bit of a long drawn out answer here, Bo, but I just wonder if they can keep up, because they've got a lot of work to do. They've got a lot of catching up to do. They got a new CEO, fellow named Patrick Doyle, and he ran Domino's, and he is fantastic. I have a good friend of mine who's a Domino's franchisee, and when Patrick announced he was leaving Domino's to go over to RBI, this friend of mine called me. He says, "You're going to love this guy. You're going to love him." And he goes, "I know you're just a landlord, not a franchisee anymore." He goes, "But you're going to love this guy because he's really fantastic."
Well, Domino's, did a complete 180 in the last 10 years. They are killing it out there right now.
They got their proverbial poop in a pile, Bo, and so they invested on all the things that really good brand invests in. They invested in improved technology, a much more efficient box to deliver products. They invested in improving the product quality, and that is head to toe. And so, there's a famous case study written about Domino's Pizza. Harvard Business School prepared it. And, if you go to their headquarters in Michigan, I've never been, but, they talk about this in the case study, is that, they actually built a Domino's Pizza in the headquarters. And so when they're training new franchisees, they're like, we're going to go right into the store. This is what your store is going to look like right here. And this is how you make a pizza. And this is how you create boxes. And this is how you handle orders and how you make sure they get out on time. And then their app is just fantastic. The app to order the pizza.
For Burger King to kind of, I guess you could say, reinvent themselves, reinvent their menu. You're talking millions of dollars, right? For them to try and improve their menu and stay competitive against some of these other people, that's a huge investment for that company, correct?
Yeah, it is. It's more like billions than it is millions.
Really?
And to date, Burger King, over the course since 2023, they've invested about close to $2.5 billion into the company. They did a thing called the Reclaim the Flame, which is a $400 million investment in marketing and improved facilities and in giving money to the franchisees so they could make investments into their restaurants. And then they spent another $1.5 billion. They bought their largest franchisee, Carroll's Corporation, for $1 billion, so $1 million a store. And so, which is really, it's kind of counterintuitive to the model. It's like you're buying your own franchisee. That doesn't make sense. Why don't you want franchisees to open more stores? And typically you do, but Burger King felt strategically that this was the smart move to buy their largest franchisee, and then they committed to spend another $500 million to renovating those stores. Wow. And so what they're doing is they're renovating those restaurants, and as those restaurants are getting completed, then what they're doing is they're selling them in smaller clusters, 10, 15, 20 stores, to operate approved operating franchisees, and there's a new wave of younger franchisees that are coming onto the scene now. These are people in their 30s and their 40s who are now getting invested into the brand, and which is really good because the thing is if you have these legacy brands, my dad bought his first restaurant in 1969, and so the only way he was going to stay in the business is to have a successor. So he had me, and if I was still operating Burger Kings, I'd be talking to my two children like, "Do you want to get into this?" And so that's how the brand stays alive, is to reintroduce these restaurants, but with new franchisees, and it seems to be working on a lot of levels.
So now that you're on the other side of the coin as a landlord, since you own all of the real estate that you used to have with the Burger Kings, obviously I would assume that you keep a pretty close eye as to what Burger King is doing to make sure that your real estate investment stays secured. Because if Burger King, decides to start closing shop, for you to try and redevelop those properties now becomes a huge cost burden to you, right?
That's right, and you're 100% right about that, Bo. And the thing is about our company, we have put in systems and brought in some people, some great companies to help us with it. About a year and a half ago, we were doing, prior to a year and a half ago, we were doing all of our asset management internally, fully vertical. And then about a year and a half ago, my partners and I said, "Geez, let's try something different here." So we brought in a third party, a company called Winslow Property Management, and they specialize in this sort of work. Doing retail work. They have, they manage literally hundreds of properties for multiple landlords in 46 states, and so they had the infrastructure in place. And what that did for us is it gave us a better opportunity to see how good of a job our tenants are doing keeping maintaining the properties. Because the way our leases are built is that these are called triple net leases. And if somebody's ever on a real estate website, they're on LoopNet, and then they see this lease that says NNN lease, and they're like, "What does that mean, NNN?" What it means is net of maintenance, net of taxes, and net of insurance. That's the rent payment that you get. So basically, you're a landlord that is not responsible for any of the costs associated with operating the property. You're just collecting rent. But the thing that you have to do is make sure that your tenants are keeping up their end of the bargain, and that is they're maintaining the property like it's their own. And sometimes they do it, and sometimes they don't. And when they don't, you have to in a very organized fashion, push them, persuade them, beg them, cajole them, do whatever it takes to get them to do that. Because there is, the leases are written typically in such a way that they tend to be very tenant favorable, because the tenant is bearing all the burden of the expense of operating the property. But it doesn't give them license to just do nothing. And we've had our fair share of scraps with our tenants. Like, hey, this thing needs a new parking lot. It needs a
Yeah.
new paint job.
Yeah.
So.
Do you and the team ever sit back and strategize and do what if scenarios where you say, okay, what if these Burger Kings decide to close tomorrow? What is our strategy to replace those tenants?
Yes,
Okay.
we do that all the time. I think to go whistling by the graveyard, and, as my son reminds me, hope's not a business plan, Dad.
Yeah.
And, and I go, you're right, kid. My son Joey's he's a really smart guy, and he's actually. A commercial broker here in the greater Boston area. He runs the industrial division for this company called Atlantic Capital Partners. And so he's got, totally tuned in and on the assets and so forth. And there's a lot of times he's bringing things to me saying, Dad, we got to talk about this. We got to think about this. And so it's great, to have that sort of like that mental muscle around you, so you're not lifting it all by yourself.
So I know you said that you're not really adding to the portfolio, but since you guys completely exited, have you guys added to your portfolio since your exit?
No, not really.
Okay.
Because they're just, there wasn't really any opportunities that made sense. The thing is with commercial real estate, you make all your money on the buy. So, and we're in Boston. I mean, you're in Chicago, and so you know what it's like. So these properties, come up in for value, and the asking price, and they go, oh, they're never going to get that, and then they sell it for it. The price, and I go, Jesus,
Yeah.
then what is our stuff worth?
Yeah.
And it happens all the time. I mean, it's nuts.
We ourselves are the same way. We haven't transacted on anything because the values were just insane. I mean, post COVID, rates were so low. There's a housing. We mostly look at multifamily, right? So there's a housing crisis. The rates were ridiculously low for many, many years, and so people were buying deals that were just absurd, right? And we just weren't willing to take that type of risk with investors' money when we knew that these properties were overvalued. A lot of the people too were buying it on bridge.
Yeah.
And so when rates jumped, they went from having a 2 3/4, 3 1/4 rate to now all of a sudden they're paying 10. And that just kills your cash flow.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to take that risk. So you're 100% right. We're still looking, but it's got to be the right buy,
Yeah.
It's very, very competitive out, and there's so much dry powder on the sidelines, just drooling to get into something,
Yeah. Well, when the cap rates, I as a personal rule of thumb, I've never invested in a deal that had negative leverage.
Yep.
And most of the people that I know feel the same exact way, and I never saw that come to be an acceptable thing up until about like the last couple of years, and where I'd go to some real estate conference, start chatting with a guy that I know, and he's, well, we just did a deal, and he tells me the cap rate, and tells me, I said, what'd you finance that at? And he tells me, and you can tell by the look on my face that I'm like doing, yeah. He goes, yeah, Joe, we got negative leverage, and I said, well, how long are you going to carry that? He says, well, we figure by year 3 we should be even, and then by year 4 we should be positive again. And I'm like, and you're shaking your head. You're like, no.
A lot of it too is PE money, right? They have a mandate that they've got to churn their money, and so they'll buy it to negative leverage, and they'll just wait till the end and see and figure it out at the end.
Yeah.
Which is not good for the market.
No, it's not. And the thing is for me is I whenever I look at deals, the thing I always look at is, okay, let's talk about cash on cash return. They go, well, would you like to talk about the IRR? I go, no, I don't need to talk about the IRR. Well, geez, most people we talk to want to talk about the IRR. I'm like, I don't want to talk about IRR because I know how an IRR formula works, and it has a projected exit with a PIUA, with a Payuya cap rate at the exit. And they always
Yep.
go, "What is Payuya?" It's an acronym. It means pull it out of your ass. You know, you know.
Yeah.
And so
True.
So you're going to back into a cap rate that works for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, geez, that's not working, pal. You know.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Because look what happened in the last 3 or 4 years. Guys were buying deals at 3.5 caps. Like
Yeah.
you said, negative leverage, right?
Yeah.
They're financing deals at 4, buying them for 3.5, and now cap rates are 6.5 to 7.
Yeah.
So they're doing their underwriting and they're putting their pro forma at, oh, well, we'll exit at the same cap rate, 3.5%.
Yeah.
The hell you are. Now you're double. So you've just lost your ass big time.
Yeah, you're right on the money there, Bo. No pun intended. I mean, I there's this fellow I'm friends with, and he's a syndicator out of the southeast, and young guy, fantastic guy, and I ran into him at a conference, and he's over the course of like 5 years, 5-6 years, he had put close to $1 billion to work, and I said, wow, good for you, holy cow. And so he's telling me about this stuff, and he says, I'll send you some of my deals. I'm like, okay, sure, I'd love to look. I mean, if someone wants to send me their OM, I always look at it. You know, if I'm interested, great, and if I'm not, I just, it's how you get smart. That's how you'll learn a lot reading other people's OMs.
Yep.
So he sent me this thing, and the acquisition was at 2%, at 2 cap, and I was just like, and I'm saying to myself, okay, the only reason that makes sense is if the rent roll is currently at like 1,000, but the market rent is like at 2,000, and the current owner is just, has just been lazy. Now, I don't want to say lazy, but you get to these owners sometimes, and they develop a relationship with that's Mrs. Corelli, and she's been my tenant here for 30 years.
Yeah.
I don't want to raise her rent. And it's like, okay, well, Mrs. Corelli's way behind,
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I think he's doing okay. But when I saw that, I was just a little shocked. Like, wow, that's quite a risk there.
Yeah, it is, man. It is.
Yeah.
I get you 100%. Joe, man, I loved having you on. Where can everybody reach you, learn more about you? I know you said you kind of do a little bit of coaching too, right?
Yes. So my favorite thing to do is to coach and help people who are trying to get involved with franchising and real estate. I'm an adjunct professor at Boston University. Best place to find me is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I don't know if you can put my link in the
Absolutely
description here, but
Yep.
that's the best way to reach me. And then I have a newsletter that goes out every Friday called the Franchise Playbook, and it is very franchising heavy, but we talk about the real estate part of the business as well, because to me those are two pieces that go hand in hand fundamentally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we look at the same stuff with on my gym side, right? With my brand, I've got so many people say, "When are you going to franchise this?" I'm not ready yet.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I get it. Joe, thank you so much, man. I loved having you on. Wealth of knowledge and fantastic stories, man.
Well, thank you, Bo. It's been a pleasure being on your show both times. Two handsome Italian guys talking about stuff. Oh,
That's right. Hey, forget about it. Thank you, Joe.
All right, Bo. Thank you.